uneasy about the idea of doing an album and it doesn't exist as a thing that you can hold, you know, with a sleeve and everything. Obviously the switch from vinyl, having the 12-inch sleeve to CD was a bit much to take, and the cassette where it's really everything's shrunk down. But then to be shrunk down even further where it doesn't even exist except as this invisible digital information.
Do you feel like that's kind of compromising the art of, I mean, it's more than just music, you know, you want to present.
Yeah,
you know,
I think it is in a way, because to me the sleeves are always very important, and having the lyrics on the sleeve.
Right.
I guess the argument is, well, you'll download the image as well, you'll have that on your screen. I can hear an echo of my voice. Oh, could you turn it down? Just making me, I thought it was my hangover or something. But I like the tactile element of, you know, like, for instance, I prefer to read a book than to have a book on a little computer screen. But, you know, I'm 38 now. I mean, for my son, who's 2.5, that's the only world he will know. I suppose he'll have a little personal communicator. And they'll probably advance. In fact, the screens will probably be like a paper-like material, so they'll have a tactile element. You'll probably have like a reusable newspaper, which will have a little wire on the top, so you'll be able to turn the pages and you'll just download the paper, which will be great for environmentally. Right. It'll be much better than chopping down trees. And for instance, not having your music on, not using oil to make vinyl and CDs, it's probably a good thing. It just takes some getting used to. That you create a thing that you hold, particularly when you're a young band, when you start off and you have your first album and you take it home and you show your mum and your dad, and, well, I've got my own record. And to make that leap, where it's just invisibly passed all around the world, it's just getting used to that concept of that, and it probably is a good thing in some way.
Do you remember bringing home your first album to your parents? And
yeah, I do. I was probably still living at home when I had my first album because I was a teenager, and it was fantastic. You know, seeing your little picture on the thing, and it was wonderful. It was just something that you dream about. You know, I was in bands when I was about 11 or 12, so the idea of having a record. And in those days, it was harder to get a record out. I mean, although the industry has become more corporate and they're merging, there are a lot of little pseudo-independent outlets that are all tied up. Then it seemed to be harder to get a record out. I mean, there's now something like 100,000 releases every year. 20 years ago, there was maybe a couple of thousand. So it's kind of multiplying every year. So it was a real achievement. And yeah, it's amazing. It's like the first time you see your interview in print. You see your name in print. I mean, the novelty wears off after a few years, but initially we see your photograph, and it's great. It's exciting.
Do you think that's the biggest change in the music industry since you started, the technology?
The technology's, yeah, I mean, it's massive changes. That, on the one hand, the technology, on the other hand, I'd say it's become much more corporate. Any artist that has much individuality has become marginalised. I'd say it's become more formularised. Say the way the film industry goes the same way, you know, where they have focus groups and screenings to test out market reaction. The same thing with the record industry now, which is, you look at what is successful, then you just try to sign bands that fit into a particular category. The record industry is not really led anymore by people that love music or understand music or are passionate about it. It's really led by executives that are beholden to the shareholders, that are more interested in their own perks. I mean, these people, and I know a lot, having been actually professional in the industry since I was a 15-year-old kid, since I was working for publishers and whatever. Over that period of time, I've met a lot of people. A lot of the people I know run the corporations now as well. And seeing these people, it's a shame that these people don't really care about music. and see how people change. People that I thought did care about music, you just see at the end of the day, they're frightened. They're frightened to really make bold decisions. They are really more interested in feathering their own nest, stuffing their own pockets, living off the fat of others.
Do you feel kind of the same way, like your passion for the music at 15 is a lot different than when
No,
you're 38?
I feel very passionate, luckily. See, I knew what I was going to do when I was 4 years old, believe it or not. I mean, I lived in a pub, and we had live bands in the pub, and the customers would ask me, I was a little kid sitting on the stairs, and the customers would say, you know, as you do to little kids, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I always would say, well, I want to be a singer or an actor. And luckily, my passion has stayed the same. My feelings about the business have changed dramatically, but you just try to surround yourself with people that you like and trust and respect, that you can work with. And for instance, this is a very rare occasion for me to be in a record company, because they didn't want to pay for a hotel room for me to do it, and they said, well, it's easy if you come to a record company. I was with Sony for 17 years. I can count the amount of times on one hand I went into the office. I just wouldn't go in there. This is the first time I've been into the Universal building. Because it depresses me. You know, you go up there and you wander around the corridors and you see all these posters of all these new bands they've signed that you know are going to be dropped within like 6 months because they didn't sell very well. And it reminds me too much of what the industry's about. I'm still an idealist and a romantic about what the industry's about. And I think it's more, what interests me is more, you know, the artist's relationship with the audience. That's the magical part, really. The rest of it just tends to like get in the way and dilute it, really. And you get to the point where the way that it's got, particularly recently, where, like I said, the people that are running the thing, they could be in any industry. And because of these takeovers, we're in Universal's building now, but Universal, of course, was just taken over by Seagrams, who recently took over Polygram. America Online just took over Time Warner. They're going to merge with EMI, although it's a takeover, but they say it's a merger because there's a get-out clause for a lot of the artists if EMI's taken over, so they've got to pretend it's a merger. So there's all this bullshit going on. And it's changed. It's just, you know, I mean, it's not that it was so wonderful in the 80s, I suppose, but at least in earlier times you had people running record companies that didn't treat artists like inanimate objects. You can't run this industry as if it's the car industry. You know, you're dealing with feelings and emotions, and artists get writer's block, or they get depressed, or they get happy. You can't then expect them to, you know, just sort of deliver the goods as if they're some kind of a machine. And to run an industry like that, I think you're going to run into trouble. And the development we're seeing now, I think that maybe record companies will cease to exist. They'll become content providers for internet companies. You know, as you're looking at digitization of television, and you've got 100 channels, and you need content to sort of to pour down the infrastructure and the pipelines.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting time. It doesn't have to be bad or bad. It's just changing.
Right.
So I'm looking at it from a slightly nostalgic point of view, seeing it change. But you know what? It could open up tremendous possibilities in terms of artists empowering themselves. All of a sudden they say, well, through our website or whatever, we can interact with our own audience.
Right.
Directly. We don't need a record company anymore. And all of a sudden there's less restrictions.
Okay. Do you feel less restrictions at Nothing Records?
I never felt restricted at Sony, actually. I had complete freedom. It was only towards the last couple of years where they started to say, I was out of contract actually, and they started to say, well, to give you the contract we want, the industry's changed, we need hits, whatever. But I must say, I had a very happy time at Sony in terms of artistic freedom. And that's the reason I signed to Nothing inside of Universal, because I had the same guarantees that I don't like anyone in the studio when I'm working. You know, that's very important to me. Okay.
And is your studio here in New York now?
No, I have two studios. I have a commercial studio in London, which I've owned for quite a few years, which unfortunately I don't get to use very often. And I've just put together a nice mobile studio in New York. Okay. So I use both.
And I get a feeling from the new album that it has a New York feel to it. Is it a response to you being here?
Yeah, I think so. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to spend more time in New York, because I felt bored in England, just a bit burnt out. So I'd always spent a lot of time in New York since I was about 20. It was always a home from home. In fact, in a lot of ways, I felt more at home here than I did in England or in London for some reason. Being a foreigner probably makes me feel more relaxed, but I felt it would inspire me, and it did. I mean, often in subconscious ways, just by riding around on the subways and writing about it, just being in a place like New York. Although New York has changed, it's become very Disney-fied now, as you'd see if you wander around Times Square.
Has it changed a lot since you first visited New York?
Yeah, a lot. I think about it a lot as I'm around certain parts of town. The parts of town where I first came to when I came to New York, it's changed a lot. Become, again, I mean, even more corporate in the sense that they're attracting large corporations back, because a lot of them moved their headquarters out of New York because of the crime rate. But Mayor Giuliani has sort of attempted to flush out a lot of poor people, encourage corporations back, so the rents have got very high. Times Square is a good example of that, where it's become like Disneyland, really. Mm-hmm. Literally, I think Disney have actually bought up a lot of Times Square, so there's not a lot left of it. And I have mixed feelings because I have a son now. I obviously am pleased that the crime rate's gone down. But at the same point, from a creative point of view, it's less edgy. It's become a bit blander. Right. So it may be time to move somewhere else.
Okay. And now, is the song Globalize, is that kind of a response to living in Chinatown or living like in New York where there's a lot of cultures clashing in a small amount of space?
It's more a response to just generally globalization of the world. That song was written sort of 3 years ago now, but it's still very topical because you had the recent riots against the World Trade Organization in Seattle. And I think it's a really, I don't know whether these ideas necessarily fit into music. I think they do, but music has become so unpolitical nowadays. You just got dance music, rap music, or did have, or the odd small percentage of rap music still has a political message, but generally a lot of music is very unpolitical. But I still think that there's a place for that. But that is written about globalization and just the underbelly of it, really. The effect on all you hear about is certain benefits. What benefit a small percentage of the population. But you don't hear so much about when factories are closed down and their production is shifted to, say, India or Thailand or whatever, and they're closing down factories, whether it's in the Midwest in America, for instance, or large parts of Europe, and just generally, state assets being sold off at bargain prices, privatised, and particularly that happened in Britain, and that's something I felt quite strongly about. The water, the electricity, the car industry was just all sort of given away to private industry. Public assets, the public owned those. And there was a big myth. It was just like, we're privatising. You can buy shares in the electricity company. The public already owns the electricity company, and so they're being sold off. So that's a very long conversation, but that's something that I feel very uncomfortable about generally.
Now, you mentioned taxi cab advertisements. Like the first time you got in a cab in New York, did it kind of freak you out or amuse you?
No, you get that in London now as well. In fact, in London, they go one better. They paint the entire cab. The old black cabs, which people love. They're not even black anymore. They're like pink or orange or whatever. I'd say it's reaching saturation point with advertising. Obviously, America has always been way ahead of the game, but Britain has followed the same pathway, and a lot of Europe. I think there should be a tax on advertisers. I seriously do. I think you go into a public place, you can't lay your eyes anywhere without being accosted by it. And I feel manipulated. Whether it's sort of sexually, not exactly explicit or implicit adverts. You go into a newsagent and there's like row upon row of virtually naked women. Men are sexually exploited in a similar way or a different way to women, but we are still sexually exploited. Who is all that stuff aimed at? And I think they should be taxed. heavily. The advertising industry has money coming out of its ears. They don't know what to do with it. It's worth billions. It dwarfs the recording industry. And I think that public spaces should be clutter-free. You know, the way we should be entitled to clean air, clean water, we should be entitled to go out and our eyes should be able to rest somewhere without being manipulated. I feel pretty strongly about that. And I think in the future people will start to think. I think we're reaching saturation point. I mean, even the internet has been colonised now, isn't it? Really? It's just like you go on, it's just. Whereas, say, in the 80s and 90s, the internet was fairly free of business, wasn't it? It was more a forum for communication rather than commerce. But that's changed.
Completely.
Yeah, which is a shame. I think it was the whole point was spreading information. Now it's spreading infotainment, I suppose.
So does that, like the oversaturation of information, does that fuel your paranoia?
Thing is, I don't think it is information. I think a lot of it is useless information. For instance, who owns the news? You've got to bear that in mind. Now, there's these WAP phones that are coming out, and you're subscribed. Suppose you subscribe to a news channel. Okay, if it's CBS News, CBS is just taken over by Westinghouse. Westinghouse manufactured nuclear power plants or whatever. Now, supposing there's like a nuclear accident at a Westinghouse plant, do you think on your news channel that you subscribe to CBS, that's going to come up? You've got to bear in mind who owns the news. There's like an old saying that about history. History belongs to the victors. I think news and information belongs to the corporate victors. And you can still find a certain amount of information if you dig, but it's not the age of information. I think it's the age of manipulation that we're living in.
Okay. So working for the conglomerate, do you get a discount on vodka?
Do they do vodka? I thought it was whiskey. Tropicana.
Oh, they have everything. I'm sure
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now
I see myself as a homeopath.
Homeopath.
A little bit of poison in the hole does some good.
Okay. All right. And I know you played some live shows towards the end of last year. How did it feel to get back in the small clubs?
It was great. I always preferred small shows to big shows, although everyone says that, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. But it's true. It's much more fun.
The crowd seemed very, very attentive and very, they didn't want to disturb your performance.
It was great. But I was saying to someone earlier that the American audiences were far more open-minded generally than the European audiences, which I thought would be the other way round for some reason. Like in the warm-up shows we did last year, we played virtually the entire new album, and they really responded well to it. It was great. And then we played some old stuff. But it's good, after all that time. Trouble is, with this tour, we've got a lot of gaps. It's like we do a couple of weeks, then we have 6 weeks off, then we have a couple of weeks. And the calluses go soft, and the fingers, the voice gets weaker.
Right.
It's the other guys in the band play more than I do. And I haven't played live for like 6 years, so I'd forgotten all the thing. How to sing and play guitar at the same time.
Do you remember your first show in the States?
I think it would have been in either LA, Boston or New York in 1989, I think.
Okay, with Johnny Marr on guitar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we did a small club tour before the main tour. Because I hadn't played in America before that. I guess that's what it would have been. One of those cities. I think we did 3 or 4 cities in that one. Yeah, that was good.
Okay. Yeah, I was at the show in Boston.
Oh, it was. It was Boston, wasn't it?
I'm not sure if that was the first.
It was one of the first, though.
Okay.
It was a good show, though.
It was top 5 of all time. So, and I know that you've commented in the past that the energy you get from a live show kind of fuels your desire to produce more music.
Yeah.
And do you think that's? Do you think you missed that when you're away for 6 years, like not?
Yeah. I didn't intend to be away that long. It just happened. And a lot of the time, people, because I've gone through huge periods of time, for instance, between like 1982 and 1989, I didn't do any shows. Actually, I just did a couple of acoustic shows to support the Labour Party with my old friend Zygmunt Yeka. Because I was in Australia, I met up with Billy Bragg, and he persuaded me to start doing shows again. And I couldn't do it. I said I was more. It wasn't that I was afraid of playing live, which some people said. It was that I loved being in the studio. That's what it was. But I do really enjoy being in the studio. I love it, you know. But playing live, I really enjoy that as well. But I did miss it, and I do miss it. And every time I go back to playing live, I think, why on earth? It's like when you go, you know, if you start going to the gym after years, you think, you feel fantastic. Why didn't you keep it up?
Right.
But it's a mental thing, isn't it? Once you slip out of something, you just forget what it's like.
Okay. And comment a little bit about the band you have playing now with you.
Have you read their bios on the website?
A little bit of it. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, Kenny Rogers, I mean, is, you know.
You should read their full bios. Go onto the website and read the full bio, because Spencer Campbell is one sick person. He's, you met him, right? He's sick. In fact, there's a little story on the little tour we just did in January. We were travelling by bus from Copenhagen to Hamburg. And I don't know what happened. After most shows, he drinks a whole bottle of Maker's Mark. I don't know if that's Seagrams, is it? But we should get it for free if it is. And he shouldn't drink really, because he's not a good drunk. He's great when he's sober, and he's a fantastic singer and bass player. But he'll have a sip, and then he's completely drunk, and then he'll go and drink the entire bottle. But he was wandering up and down the corridor of the bus, and I was trying to sleep, and he was playing very loud music, and I told him to keep it down. He kept turning it up, and I just said, "We just shut up, turn it down. Go down, go up, go down." And I fell asleep, then I heard this sort of screaming sound coming from somewhere. Woke us up in the middle of the night, and he'd got into the bunk, the guitarist's bunk, and was like virtually trying to rape the guitar player. And that's, you know, I wouldn't let the guitarist out of the bunk, and then like there's fighting, there's arms and legs coming there, and eventually the guitarist fell out of the bunk with a bit of blood everywhere and stuff, and we had a bit of a problem after that, because they wouldn't really talk to each other. That was the last show, come up to the last show, and well, it caused a bit of embarrassment. There's been numerous situations like that on the tour.
Okay.
But you know, music has become so homogenised, hasn't it? You know, you used to get characters like that, like Keith Moon and whatever, or the John Bonham type. I suppose it's good to have one of those in the band. But he's a great player. Disillusioned with the country scene, because he loves the old guys like, you know, Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash and Kenny Rogers. He doesn't like the new lot, so he got interested after I did the Hank Williams record, and he sat in on some of the sessions we did after the album was out. Eric Skermerhorn played guitar with Iggy Pop for a few years. He's a wonderful player. I met him, probably known him about 7 years. And he played on the Hank Williams album, and he was involved in this album from an early point. You know, I had a room at the studio down at Death House Studios, so he was involved in that from an early point. Earl Harvin played with people like Tony Bennett. MC 900 for Jesus, it's probably best known.
Right.
And has his own jazz trio in Dallas, called the Earl Harvin Trio. And I'd say he's got to be one of the most aware musicians I've ever worked with. You saw him play, right?
Yeah.
Good player, huh?
Mm-hmm.
He's
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how you guys came up with the stage setup. I mean, it was very just five red lights. I mean,
well, because
nothing
the
everyone's
Seagrass,
dressed.
because they're so tight-fisted, they wouldn't give us any tour support.
Now, has that
I
changed?
think I'm joking, though.
Are you playing bigger venues now? I mean, on the January tour.
Yeah, we graduated. I mean, I wanted to, because I've been out of the picture for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
6 or 7 years is a long time to be away in this industry,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore I've got to work my way up the rankings again. It's like if you're a sportsman, I suppose. If you're out that way, things change. Loads of bands come up, and they're going to be, you know, and audiences tend to drift away, whatever. So I decided to blood the new band. You know, we play small places, and also just to get my confidence and stuff up, just keep it small. So It means it's more expensive doing it that way because there's less income, obviously, and it's harder to sustain a tour. You've got to tighten your belt, but it's much more enjoyable. You know, the band really bond well on stage, and it's just much more pleasurable. But we are going to be shifting up the venues. Like the next European tour, it goes up, and then the American tour, and then there's the festival stuff. So.
Okay, the American tour will be late spring, early summer?
I think May.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how big places will you play then?
We're only going to pay like about 25,000. Most I don't know. I'm lying. I don't know. Probably like 1,500, 2,000, something like that.
Okay. And you're comfortable on that size place?
You mean, yeah, that's pretty intimate. Theatres.
Right.
Yeah, I like theatres.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The ones I don't like are the enormous dome things.
Right.
And I've done those, but the biggest places I've played off my own back were like, I had headline festivals about 40,000 or something like that, but usually I played sheds off my own back, which were like 15,000.
Right.
But I've played enormous domes as support, and they're about 50 or 60,000.
Right.
And well, it's difficult. I don't like being a support band really, because the audience are not really that. You have a minority that are there to see you, but generally you're playing to people that are not really that interested.
Right. Who did you play with last time? Depeche Mode?
Depeche Mode, and we did a show with New Orleans, something like that. But it's a bit. I don't really enjoy that because those venues are too big. I don't like going to those venues as a member of the audience, and I don't like being there on stage, because also you've got to, unless you rely on giant light shows and stuff like that, which I don't really like. Not only that, you've got to make your mannerisms bigger. It's educational and it's good from a certain point of view. But the sound is odd, it's echoing all over the place. You can't really see the audience, you can't even see the other band members, they're so far away. So it's a bit of an out-of-body experience. I generally like about 5 to 10,000. When it's our own show, that's probably my favourite kind of thing.
Okay. And how long has Bill Puplick been messing with your guitars?
Do you know Bill Puplick?
No, I just know the name.
Bill, interesting. Bill Puplick I met 1978. He's now one of the top luthiers in Britain. I met him when he worked in a little store down in Leytonstone, Holiday Music. Lovely man, unbelievably talented with guitars, because he loves guitars, but he takes his time, but you get him back, it's pure love, just the attention to detail. He would do things with the guitars you wouldn't even think of, take them apart, lovingly put them back together. So he's done my guitars for years, over 20 years. Interesting thing was, he used to play in a band that performed at my dad's pub. Coincidentally, I didn't realise that till I'd known him for about 5 years. But I turned him on to Johnny. Or rather, I turned Johnny onto him. And then Johnny turned him onto Oasis and Paul Weller, and he's now the top guy in England now.
Okay.
He's fantastic though, lovely man.
Do you see Johnny much anymore?
We speak email and phone and stuff like that, but I never go to Manchester.
Have you heard his new stuff he's coming out?
No. He's working on solo stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Have you?
No, just heard of it.
I told him to do that 10 years ago. I've been telling him to do his own album, and he didn't. And I'm glad he's finally doing it, because he should have done it. He should have done it since he left the Smiths, actually. But
right.
I don't know why.
Okay. Couple last questions. Have you made it to the Himalayas yet?
Not yet. It's a bit difficult with your father running off to the Himalayas.
Okay. All right. And now, did I hear that you had open heart surgery a few years back? No?
No, I didn't.
All right. Bad
Who
press.
said that?
I read it.
Where did you read that?
I'll send it to Susan. I'll get it to you somehow.
My father did.
Okay, maybe it was. Is that right around the time that your brother passed as well?
No.
Okay.
Someone said I had open heart surgery.
I thought that's
what
what
a
it
creepy
said.
kind of rumour to me. I hear lots of things, that I've been a heroin addict, that I'm this, that I'm that. Who knows?
And which do you prefer, flotation tanks or acupuncture?
Actually, both the same afternoon I've done, which is really good. Having acupuncture, then going to the flotation tank.
Do you feel that in the kind of small wounds from the acupuncture?
No.
Because I remember the only time I went to flotation tank was like I had some cuts on my hand.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, but
So
the
dull.
acupuncture, no,
Okay.
they're too small. The salt is a problem with that. No, but the acupuncture, you wouldn't feel it. But having the acupuncture and going into a flotation tank is fantastic. Then having a massage.
Okay. All right. And I know you've mentioned in some past interviews about LSD. Do you remember the last time you took it?
Oh, a long time ago. It would have been about, actually, it was about 4.5 years ago. I didn't mean to take it. I was at a party. And I've not taken drugs for years, to be honest. And I was a bit drunk and whatever. And I wanted something. I was getting a bit tired, but I wanted to stay up. Someone gave, and I was drunk, and I took it. And as soon as I swallowed it, I regretted it. I'm like, why the hell did I do that for? Because I had to go to a family party the next day, which I really wanted to go to with my aunts and uncles I hadn't seen for ages. And of course, when I started to come up, and it was okay. It wasn't a bad trip or anything, but I had to soak myself up. And I remember the next morning, cold showers, cups of coffee, and I couldn't get myself together. But I did go to the party. I managed to just about keep myself together. It wasn't very pleasant, really.
Okay.
When was the last time you used it?
The Indy 500 last Memorial Day.
Good fun?
Cars at 200 miles an hour?
You were driving one?
No, just watching. That's fine. And last question, could you just tell me a little bit more about 45 RPM, volumes 1 and 2?
That's singles compilations, because I've never done any compilations. I'm finally doing two volumes, but they will have a couple of new tracks on it as well, and that will come out end of this year, probably, or at the latest, January.
And will there be, when you're saying a couple new tracks, will it be anything off of like Pornography of Desire? Or,
no.
okay, or nothing off Gun Sluts?
No, because Guns Sluts is completely...
Now, when they say you have like a bulging vault, so you
I do have a bulge.
retain the rights of everything until...
Well, I'll tell you
it's put
why.
out.
I'll tell you why, because Spirits and Pornography of Despair were before I signed with Sony. Gun Sluts was after I left Sony.
Okay.
All the other stuff, there's loads of other stuff, like alternative versions, some great alternative versions of stuff off the same album and Dust. But that, obviously, that stuff belongs to Sony, but I have all the tapes. So it won't go out unless I want it to go.
Okay.
You've got to watch these people.
Great. All right. I think that's it.
Fantastic.
Excellent.